like got off the little boat and ended up at a beach club where they literally bury the food under the sand and it cooks in the heat of the hot springs. And it was
Crazy.
so unique and so delicious and beautiful, like just beautiful, that I would totally recommend that kind of experience to anyone. Just go, hop on a taxi boat and see where it brings you.
Arrivederci. Ah, ok. Bravo, sai che non me lo ricordo. Prosecco. Allora non ce l'ho, c'ho crema. I'm Wendy Holloway, and this is Flavor of Italy, sharing the very best of Italian food and wine, lifestyle, and culture.
Hi, everyone. This is Wendy Holloway with Laura Itzkowitz, and we want to talk to you about something that we both feel kind of strongly about, and that is uh, your next trip to Italy, or if you're here already and traveling around, to get off the bucket list and have a quieter, more peaceful, more engaging kind of a bucket list that is yours. And Laura and I were just talking and saying, it's crazy a lot of times that, and we're guilty of this too, but tourists that come to Italy and they go to a list of places that they've heard other people have gone to, and they kind of want to check off a bucket list that might not even really be theirs. I mean, a lot of people end up doing a lot of art things and they might not even do art stuff at home. And that goes for lots of kinds of things. So I think probably you should really think about, forget about like bucket lists and things that you have to do to make it an enjoyable, engaging trip for yourself. And we have some ideas, but my ideas and Laura's ideas might not be what you have in mind. So, let's engage on this topic of uh, how to travel to Italy in 2026 and create your own new um, bucket list that sort of avoids over tourism. So I had written a newsletter not too long ago about nun trails. And it's something I'd seen I don't know where I first saw it. I think it was a BBC thing, but it's something I've actually done myself in the past. And these are these spiritual paths and walks that you can do. And they'll get you sort of off the beaten path and get to see some other really cool things. So you might come to Rome, and one of the places, and I've had on my website for quite a while, is a day trip to Subiaco. And there is one of those nun trails there. So you really get to see a slice of kind of real Italy, if you wish. And these nun trails that have been set up by nuns um, are really interesting things to check out. And so I've written about that, and you can see that in my Substack posts and also on my website. Another thing, I feel that you really can't miss the Vatican. And Laura and I both love the Vatican. I think it might have more art than any other place on the planet. But the Sistine Chapel is absolutely magical. But I was saying to Laura before we went online that sometimes I go there and I'd rather jump off a bridge because it's so packed with people. You can become a Vatican patron. And first of all, that supports restoration of art and stuff. But what do you get for that? The minimum is 500 euros or $500. So with that, you get your private and truly private. It's just kind of you and the cleaning people at the Sistine Chapel. And then you also get to visit a restoration lab of your choice. And I've done a bunch of the different restoration labs, and they're amazing. So let's say you pick the painting one, you would go in there and you see these these artists and artisans at work and see how they restore things. It's fascinating. Um, and then if you are in Italy frequently, there are different things that the Vatican patronage program would set up throughout the year. So there's usually some other things you can do. So it supports the Vatican. It gives you a chance to see what in my view, and again, it's my view, is one of the absolute jewels of uh, Italian culture and history and art, which is all this art in the Sistine Chapel housed there at the Vatican. Because we have to think back, it's not a religious thing per se, but uh, way back, it was the popes and really the Catholic Church who were the patrons of these artists. So, of course, so much art is housed there. It's unbelievable. So that's one thing. And then I'm sort of debating and chatting with three lifelong girlfriends who are coming over here. And one thing we're doing is a day in Florence. Well, Laura and I live here, so and you can get up to Florence in like an hour and a quarter on the train. I love that, but again, you get into these massive crowd situations. So my view is, okay, you can walk. Florence is a very manageable city and definitely not one that you would want to miss. Um, so you can really walk around Florence and see so much of it. The Duomo and that whole complex, the streets, you really get the essence and the feel of Florence in just walking through the town. You get up to the bridges. I love the artisan side of Florence, and there's a lot of jewelry makers and, well, obviously leather goods. So my vision and what I've done with people, and I'll be doing this time in addition to maybe some of the classic bucket list must see things, is to visit a few artisans and see how they work. Buy yourself something to take home. If it's a leather store, to get in a purse or get something that's custom that's yours, and then have an amazing meal and just explore the city. Now, you can do that, but you might be the kind of person who has the Statue of David and the academia and certain things that you just feel you can't miss. But consider doing it a little bit differently and say, okay, I'm going to do Florence artisans and have an amazing Tuscan meal, a thought. And then my whole thing, and has been and always will be, is food. So Laura and I are located in a great place as far as that goes. I do culinary walking tours of Rome for anyone who would like to walk around, explore, visit some markets, taste different things, maybe the different ways that Italians enjoy cocktails, their passion for, bitter beverages, have a nice meal. So those are kind of my takes to, do more in the hot spots, hot tourist spots, to focus more on artisans and that side of cities, culinary walking tours in Rome or wherever, and becoming a Vatican patron is a passion of mine. And then these nun trails. So those would be my ideas. Now, Laura's got her own bucket list, and share all of your stuff, Laura.
Yeah, thanks, Wendy. Thanks for having me on. Good to chat with you again.
Yeah, definitely.
This is a topic that I'm also very passionate about. Every year since I launched my Substack, I have published my sort of version of the classic where to go for that year, the big list that all the magazines typically publish, and I've contributed to a bunch of them over the years as well. But when I first started the list, I thought, okay, let me put my own spin on it. And instead of telling you where in the world to go, I'm going to really dig deeper into Italy as a country, right? Because there are so many incredible places all over Italy, and lots that people would never even necessarily think to visit on their trip. So, um for the past 2 years, actually, instead of just creating this list by myself, I've actually crowdsourced the suggestions. So tapping into my network of really, smart, connected locals all over the country again. So, some of the suggestions that came out on the list this year, which is available on my Substack, the New Roman Times, for paying subscribers, but just like a few tidbits that I wanted to share, right? So, obviously, the Olympics is on everyone's mind. It's happening right now. Um, Lots of people traveling to Milan and to the Dolomites for the Olympics. But I mean, I think there are going to be a lot of reasons to visit Northern Italy even long after the games are ending, right? So, Milan, I went there last year 3 times on 3 different trips, reporting on what's changing, what's happening, what to do if you're traveling to Milan for the Olympics. And there have been lots of like infrastructural improvements around the city, the metro, trams, new hotels. Like there's a lot of exciting things happening there. That's a city that I think is on the radar, but it's not one of the big three, right? So people typically for their first trip hit up Rome, Venice, and Florence. I mean, Milan is amazing. Milan is still really like a city for locals, I think. It's definitely changing. It's definitely getting more popular and more expensive, but like that's why, in my opinion, now's a great time to go, right? Because things are changing. Go now before it gets too crazy. Um, and aside from that, like some other places in northern Italy that people wouldn't necessarily have thought to go to, Trieste. I went to Trieste last year for the first time, and it's fascinating.
I've never been there. I've never been there, but I've heard that. Yeah.
It's beautiful. It's like this really fascinating mix because Trieste is all the way on the northeastern edge of Italy. It's basically right on the border with Slovenia. And so it's always been this mix of cultures. In fact, it actually wasn't even part of Italy until after the First World War. So the Italian unification was 1860. Trieste became part of Italy after the war. So there's still a lot of this like kind of Austrian influence because it had been part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire up until that point. So you walking around, you are surrounded by these beautiful buildings that almost look like Vienna. And then also a lot of Venetian influence because you're 2 hours from Venice and you're right on the sea. So it was part of like, um, that sort of maritime Mediterranean network, right? Trieste was once the main port for the Austro-Hungarian Empire. It was an incredibly prosperous city, drew tons of, you know, a very diverse group of people actually came to Trieste under the empire of Maria Teresa. And so you have all these different influences, which is really fascinating to see. And then a place that people mentioned to me that I put on the list, which is I personally have not been yet, but really want to go this year, is Cilento. So this is down in
Yeah,
southern Italy,
yeah, yeah.
right? I have been to the Amalfi Coast lots and lots and lots of times. I love the Amalfi Coast. I mean, the Amalfi Coast is undeniably beautiful, right? Like, it's that kind of classic, picture perfect Italian coastal villages, uh, hovering over these cliffs and the sea and the pastel houses and all of that. But it's also one of the parts of Italy that is really suffering from over tourism. And I see it every time I go, and I go pretty much always in the shoulder season, which, as I'm sure you know, Wendy, gets shorter and shorter every year.
Absolutely.
And so Cilento is basically just south of the Amalfi Coast, south of Salerno. It's the part of the Italian coast, so it's still in Campania, south of Salerno, but it's not so touristy. It doesn't get those crowds of people. It doesn't have the same infrastructure, first of all. It doesn't necessarily have like big fancy hotels like the Amalfi Coast does. Um, but from what I hear, and actually this year I had 3 different people all suggest Cilento. Um, I think it sounds like a fascinating place where you can go and still kind of feel that a little bit nostalgic version of what Italy used to be like, the little village where, people gather around by the bar and the older folks maybe sitting around playing cards or having their coffees and kids running around in the squares and playing soccer. Um, just a different kind of pace of life and beautiful scenery. So
And the
that's
beaches, it's surprising because it's not that far away from Rome and major, let's say Amalfi Coast.
Mhm.
But there are so many very accessible beaches that maybe would get a little bit more crowded as you get to like end of July, August, but they're pretty accessible and pleasant and not that crowded earlier in the warm season.
Yeah, totally. So yes, for sure, that's another tip is that if you do want to hit up the more popular places, just avoid the high season in the summer. I mean, I know it's not always possible. Families have kids that are, on school vacation, then that's when they have to go. But that's why I always think about, how can I be strategic about my travels? And obviously, I know that I'm coming from a very privileged place because I live here. I can more easily visit these popular destinations in the off season, right? I mean, I just came from Florence. I was in Florence for a couple of days working on a few different projects. Um, and Florence was so lovely now in February. Like, not, you can't even compare what it's like now in terms of how calm the city is versus
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
in
Downside is the weather,
3 months.
but that depends.
Yeah, I mean, of course, like of course you can't expect like perfect weather if you're visiting these places in the off season, but I mean, it's a trade-off that if you are open to it, I think it's totally worth it. I mean, like here in Rome, we've been having rain and sun. It's definitely not like the ideal weather that people love. But then again, Rome in July and August is so hot and muggy. It's not
Yeah.
great to be.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it is. So what other places what are the other places you were mentioning, that are on your bucket list? Or is it mainly the Cilento
Oh,
area you were thinking of?
Wendy, I could talk about it all day. I mean, another place that's on my personal list that I have not been to yet is Genoa. Genoa.
Genoa's great. Yeah, and it's right up there, near the Cinque Terre, but there's so many wonderful things, great food, up there by what's considered the Italian Riviera. No, that's a great place. Yeah,
I hearing that there are well, again, I keep hearing that Genoa is changing, right? And it's another one of those cities that I think um was just not really on people's I mean, it wasn't really on my radar, frankly, until fairly recently. It's considered kind of like a big gritty port city. Um but now for the last I would say last year or so, I keep hearing about, entrepreneurs that are fixing up these historic palazzos and making little boutique hotels and um you know obviously the food culture of Liguria is really worth exploring in and of itself. I mean, the pesto is amazing. I've had some of the pesto that you get up there that's made from that basil is really just you can't even compare it. Like, there's
yeah.
literally a particular strain of basil that they use that is a protected I think it's like a PDO, so protected, oh, gotta help me when it PDO,
The protected origin.
yes,
Yeah,
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 so really amazing. I mean, and obviously the seafood, incredible. They they have a lot of like wonderful culinary things to explore up there. Um,
and then another, city that, I was surprised how much I loved it, and I really love it, is Torino, Turin.
yes, that
And
came here.
yeah, that's another one that feels like you said, Laura, that, it feels like it belongs to the locals more than tourists. But it's, an incredible coffee culture. It's kind of, well, there are lots of things. That Gianduia is up comes from that area. Fabulous wines, the white truffles just outside of Turin. Have you been there?
I have, yes, absolutely, and totally agree with you. Turin is such a hidden gem. I mean, such a cliche. Sorry, I shouldn't use that term, but I mean, that was recommended by one of my sources for this list, and I have been in the past a couple of times. And it's such an elegant city because again, another like border city in a way, right? It was like part of France. There's a very strong French influence. The Savoys were up in Turin, right? Uh,
Yeah.
and so I find it really fascinating when you visit these places where these different cultures have, come and had their influence over the course of the centuries. And you can still see that. I mean, as you mentioned, also the food, amazing, the chocolate, the cafes. The cafes are like, Parisian or
Mhm.
Viennese, elegant coffee houses.
Yeah.
Uh, And palaces, like the Royal Palace of Turin is amazing. I would like to go back and see some of the other palaces in and around Turin, like the big one that's on the outskirts of Turin. I'm forgetting the name of it, but um and there's another one that was mentioned by one of my sources on this list, Castello di Rivoli, which has been turned into a fabulous contemporary art museum.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's great. And I guess, also for people interested in sports, depending on what the sport is. Okay, you mentioned in the beginning the Olympics, and there's so many people there for the Olympics. But there's for those who love tennis, there's the tennis championship in the fall in Turin. So that's a lot of fun to maybe think about combining some sort of a sports passion with a visit to a place in Italy.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned the beaches also, and another place that came up on this year's list, and that's always on my radar is Ischia, which I revisited last summer.
Love Ischia. Yeah.
And I mean, I had been to Ischia a few times already, and I feel like that's one of those places that every time I go back, I just fall in love with it more and more because there are so many different sides to that island. And I was there last summer. So in past visits, I had always gone in the sort of shoulder season, right? Spring, fall. Last year, I went in full on high season, late July, early August, and it was still very manageable, in my opinion. I mean, it
Oh,
wasn't
wow.
near as crowded as Capri gets. Um, because there's so much more space, right? Ischia is like 6 times as large as Capri. So there's literally more space for everyone to spread out. There are more beaches, and there are there's also like a wider range of experiences that you can have because there are beaches that have beautiful sandy beaches. There are rocky coves. There are the thermal
Yeah,
baths.
there's a whole culture of the thermal
Yeah.
in Ischia.
I mean, we went last summer. We ended up, me and my husband, we got on one of the little taxi boats trying to reach one of the beaches that you get to from the Sant'Angelo area. And that day, the tides were rough. And so the taxi boat, they were like, well, we can't get you all the way to Maranti, drop you off in Fumarole, like only Fumarole. So we were like, okay, I guess we're going to Fumarole today. Ended up having the most time there. It's like got off the little boat and ended up at a beach club where they literally bury the food under the sand and it cooks in the heat of the hot springs. And it was
Crazy.
so unique and so delicious and beautiful, like just beautiful, that I would totally recommend that kind of experience to anyone. Just go, hop on a taxi boat and see where it brings you.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Laura. I mean, wherever you are, to maybe not plan things out. So you might think, "Oh, this ruining my trip. I wanted to go to this place," but as you say, you and your husband ended up in this magnificent spot and probably had a better experience that you would have with your planned thing. So,
Totally.
yeah, so being open to uh, spontaneous experiences is also really important, I think.
Absolutely. And I think that is, I mean, such a just such a great way to travel in general, right? I mean, it does sometimes feel like we have these like lists of things we need to do and places we need to see and like I'm guilty of this myself, but also because I'm normally researching places for things writing and so I want to be able to, advise my readers on what to do. But really like if you're on vacation, the point is kind of to slow down, right?
Yeah,
And break from everyday life and open yourself up to wonder and beauty and serendipity.
yeah, which Italy absolutely has in abundance.
This has been Flavor of Italy. Find us on www.flavorofitaly.com and on Substack, YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook, always as Flavor of Italy.